Aaron, you played a lot of The Division, and just the other day, Massive Entertainment and Ubisoft announced The Division 2 will be showing up at E3, so that got us thinking, especially because I'm replaying the first game recently, that got us thinking what we want in the sequel when we see it at E3. So we wanted to talk about things that the first game kind of did well, maybe could have done better, but the main thing right off the bat that we want Division 2 to do is to learn from the updates they made to the first game, right?
Yeah, it's really important that they build off their progress with their community. This is a really hard lesson that Destiny 2 is learning right now. All those quality of life stuff, all the quality of life stuff that they did from Destiny 1 didn't make it into the sequel. And they're just trying to get back to how good it was at the end of the last game. So with The Division going up through the 1.8 update and the global events and the Dark Zone changes, they cannot erase that progress and that trust that they built with their community. So it's really important that the sequel starts where they left off and goes from there.
Yeah, use it as like a kind of jumping off block rather than something, oh, maybe we'll eventually get to that with the sequel as well. Speaking of Destiny 2, I think obviously that's an easy comparison because of the way these games function, kind of as those lifestyle games, right? Or Diablo, right? Like, obviously, The Division's kind of really inspired by Diablo. I want to talk about the looting, the loot grind throughout the game. Level cap in the first game, not counting the Dark Zone level, is 30, right? And the whole time you're getting there, you're getting common, rare, every once in a while you get an orange item, but very rarely, and usually it's after a boss and late game events. One thing Destiny 2 did well, I think, is it introduced a better stream of loot. Taken King kind of improved on Destiny 1, but with The Division 2, I personally would like to see that steady stream of loot, especially if they're inspired by Diablo, which I think does a great job of, you could be level like 40 in Diablo, like 30 away from the level cap and still get a legendary that was part of a set. I'd like to see more of that throughout The Division, so the grind to get to level cap before you hit late game stuff kind of gives you a taste of what some of those legendaries might be like. Or maybe like Division has set armor. I'd like to start gathering that before late game, and then later on I could start min-maxing it. But I don't know, did you feel that The Division was like rewarding enough throughout the loot grind to get to late game?
It did feel like the original Division suffered from end game design, so it felt like, and this is a problem, a lot of games again were chasing Destiny with end game, and they felt the need to have that content there after people were done with the base. And what it really did was, I feel like it like ripped a lot of the guts out of the main game and just kind of shoved it on the head. And it made it less of a good game. It wasn't as full of a game. So what you're saying about the loot grind being there persistently throughout the entire game is very important to give the players that sense of reward. How they tackle endgame after that is up in the air. I don't even know if endgame like makes The Division better than it would be if it was just a cohesive package.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would expect them to, in the sequel, maybe they could focus more of the end game on the Dark Zone and make a lot more changes to the Dark Zone. Make the Dark Zone a scarier place, make it have different enemies, make it have different logic. I mean, why is the Dark Zone any scarier than any other place in the game if it just has the same enemies?
And you kind of touched on this, but with the most recent update to The Division, which was 1.8, the patch, they made a lot of quality of life improvements. Well, throughout the whole lifespan of this game, they've been doing that. And it's a much better game than when it started, just in terms of how it plays. Like, you're talking about the Dark Zone. Now you have to actually declare that you're rogue before you just shoot someone in the face. You were saying you hope that, much like Destiny's PvP, they might kind of erase gear stats during PvP to kind of level the Dark Zone playing field.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've had a lot of games recently that are popular that are fair because they're unfair, like PUBG, right? You never know what gun you're going to pick up. But when you pick up a gun, it has to be a gun. And one of the problems with The Division's Dark Zone is that it's too much of an RPG, and you have godlike players who just pull away from the pack.
Yeah.
And even with the 1.8 update, if they declare themselves rogue, you might not stand any chance against these people.
Right.
So it has to be fair. You have to have an environment where, it's scary, it's tense, but you shoot somebody, they go down.
Yeah.
And you can't have this thing where you shoot another player and they are so much better than you, they can just shrug it off and you stand no chance, because then why would you ever go in the Dark Zone? It was so frustrating for players.
And if you play Destiny a lot, like Iron Banner events allow you to bring your stats into PvP. That's the point of them. Maybe The Division can figure out something like that. But speaking of game modes, The Division has introduced a ton in terms of just past the basic loot grind. They have Skirmish now, which is the 4v4 PvP mode. Which that itself is just kind of like, who can get more kills. It's a kind of basic. Then they have Resistance, which is like a horde mode where you and two other people are defending against, hordes of Rikers, rioters, and cleaners. But then they also have Underground, kind of like dungeons, like procedurally generated chalice dungeons, I don't know, to make a weird random Bloodborne reference. they added so many different ways to play this game. Do you want them to just start off do you think they'll start right away with those modes included?
Yeah, so you mentioned the Underground. If they built off Underground and their randomly generated dungeons, that could make a sequel to The Division really stand out. I think some other games recently, again, going back to the direct comparison with Destiny's Infinite Forest, sort of tried to sell people something like that and fell way short of what the Underground DLC was.
Yeah.
So if The Division 2 can build off of the randomly generated dungeons and really make experiences different for players, particularly as we were talking before in the endgame, that would add a lot of longevity. So building on top of that, I think, would be essential for this game.
And probably the last thing we both wanted to touch on. So in loot grind games like this, it's easy to ignore story, right? I mean, when you have people coming over your comms in the Division, they're super cheesy. They like idolize you. They're like, hey, I know you're busy, Division agent, Aaron or whatever, but could you do this awesome thing for me? I was like, I don't know. It's easy to ignore that, but at the same time, the world of the Division sets such an awesome stage. Like in Division 1, it's, Christmas time in New York City right after this virus broke out because it was like spread on money during Black Friday. It's a cool premise, and like you want to like see some badass story come out of it where the Division agents are sent in, and then you have like these moral gray areas where you're fighting different factions of just people that rose up and these different enemies that are actually kind of interlocking in terms of their interests. I want to see the Division 2 make good on the potential we saw with exploring that kind of New York or wherever 2 happens to be set. Do you have anywhere you want it to be set?
Well, you had some theories on where you think it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking because they do in the first game reference other cities being hit by something like this. I don't know. They went to San Francisco with Watch Dogs 2. I mean, maybe London would be cool. When's the last time we saw Well, Ubisoft did London with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, but that was like Industrial Revolution London. Maybe they'll go to London. It has to be for it to be the Division. I feel like it has to be this big like capitalist city. So I'm wondering. I don't think they'll stay in New York. I think that they've tried that and it was cool. It's a really cool setting. But I want them to go somewhere else. Like, who knows if it'll even be winter? Maybe it'll be like a summertime place that's just run down more like The Last of Us. It's really cool thinking about that, but my main thing is I want them to make good on, a story that supports the loot grind, even though I'm really going to be playing for the loot grind.
And I think one thing that really could support a good story in the sequel is, first of all, showing up at the right moment. So in the last game, you showed up after all the good stuff had happened, and you never got to know anybody.
Post-outbreak.
Yeah, you were just left with their stuff and their echoes, which was way less interesting. But the other thing is maybe a faction system dealing with the survivors. The people like the cleaners and even rioters in the last game had fairly logical reasons why they were doing what they were doing, and this kill-all approach really took away from the story.
Yeah.
It's like the cleaners were a bunch of blue-collar workers who saw everybody around them die and realized they had to kill the virus by literally burning it before everybody else died.
Yeah.
You just walk up and you kill them. Like the rioters, you walk across them at times and they clearly say, we did not kill this person. We're just trying to survive, and you kill them. It's like, why not get into these factions and who they are and maybe have to choose like a GTA style. Maybe some parts of the city become more or less hostile depending on your decisions.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for them to maybe even give you a who's really the good guy story, kind of like Shadow of the Colossus or something, because you are this government agency sent in to essentially be the police when the police are just wiped out, and then the rioters, the cleaners, the Rikers are all the vigilantes that we usually play as. So there's a lot of potential to tell a story from the side of the governing agency and whether they're really the good guys. But I mean, in general, I think me and you can agree. I think with the Division 2, I think Massive Entertainment and Ubisoft and all the people that they're working in conjunction with from I think Bucharest, Ubisoft, Singapore, everywhere, they're all working on this game, and they really just need to use the Division 1.8 update as a diving board rather than saying, oh, let's work back to something like that 2 years after 2 comes out. We need to avoid the mistakes Destiny made. We need to come out and prove to this 20 million people that have been playing the first game for 2 years that their time is going to be well spent right away when the game comes out. And who knows when it's going to come out. I'm predicting maybe spring 2019 if they're going to show it at E3 this year. But who knows if that'll actually happen. Yeah,
they've been working with their community to get to this point. It's actually very surprising that the game's had a resurgence. I think some of that is fatigue for other games. I mean, at the end of the day, their community is there for that min-max loot chase, the people who are still around. And they want that in the next game. They want meaningful weapons. They want Probably more meaningful like outfits. I don't know how many walnut beanies did you collect in the last game.
Scarves and bomber jackets.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the aesthetic, but I would like some variation. You get the late game, you have like riot gear on, but before that, I'd like to see some variation.
Maybe bring forward some of the use of that gear from the survival DLC.
Yeah.
And then, not lose that trust that they've worked so hard to build and carry that forward.
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe we'll see a teaser before E3 2018, but we know for sure, based on what Ubisoft said, that we will see The Division 2 at E3, and then we'll know more around then. Aaron, thank you so much for talking about The Division 2 and what we want out of it.
Thanks, Mike.